fourth lecture of Intelligent Systems, the last one of this week, the last lecture, and the last one also on the general theme of search. And I mentioned it during the lectures that there were some of the subtopics that I didn't get into that could have been interesting about uninformed search, about informed search, about adversarial search, in the interest of getting you as quickly as possible to the main method that you can apply on your own intelligent agents, on your bots, so that we could look as quickly as possible into the min-max algorithm yesterday. But there are some quite interesting algorithms and ideas, and also some classics of AI research of the last millennium that I think are worth discussing, and that's what we're going to do today. I've got two organizational things to mention, at least. The first thing is that I posted an announcement yesterday evening that there will be a last-minute support session. We scheduled it on the last minute. It will be after this lecture, this afternoon from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Berton will be available to help you with your first technical problems with programming. And the room number was in the announcement. So if you feel that you don't really know how to start, then you might have the opportunity to go there and sort of get your system up and running with the help of one of our TAs. Tomorrow there is bigger sessions, because then we really expect you to start working on the working sheets. And we have booked in 3 different time slots, at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and at 1:30. We have booked 3 different practicum rooms for you to work in. And in each of the rooms tomorrow, there will be a teaching assistant to help you with the programming. And we have to do tomorrow the good old-fashioned system that you go to the TA, you say you have a question, and they will note your name on a board, and then we do a simple queuing system, so a first in, first out, like we saw in the first lecture. Next week, I want to try some experiment with the support session, but I'm getting into that next week and explain next week how we're going to do that. So tomorrow it will be good old-fashioned. You go to a room, one of the practical rooms as you can find in the roster, in the general schedule of the course, and you just go there, take a seat, work there, and there is a TA who can help you with your practical questions. And in all the sessions, you can, in principle, you can go to any of the sessions, but you also, of course, have the working groups tomorrow with Dalia and Dora, for which you hopefully by now all have registered on Canvas. So that was organization about the support that you can get. The other point I wanted to make is that there was unfortunately a statement left over from previous year that you are supposed to use Python 2.7 for the practical. That statement was incorrect, I'm afraid. I'm sorry for that. You are also free to use, or even recommended to use, a more modern version of Python 3.x, whatever you like or whatever you have. So apologies if you have already started sort of squeezing your programming into 2.7. This was a statement that was left over from last year. So the engine should now work with Python 3.x, whatever version, recent version you have. Are there any other urgent burning questions that we should take care of now, or no? Okay, so then I'm going to talk more about search today. And as I said, there are some sort of leftovers, but I think very nice leftovers from the first 3 lectures that we're going to take care of. More on uninformed search, more on informed search, more on adversarial search. And then basically I start the course what I should have done maybe at the first lecture, namely a more systematic introduction into what intelligent systems are in the first place, what rational agents are, what the goal is of an academic AI, and maybe in the end some short notes on how to perform AI research, because in a way we have a very algorithmic, very engineering approach here to AI as an intelligent systems course, but we are also an academic environment, so we want to not only build intelligent systems, but we also want to understand intelligent systems and the mechanisms behind them and the problems and the shortcomings and the potential and so forth. And that's what you usually do in research. So I want to spend a couple of minutes at the very end on that. So let's start with the most simple thing, and that was the uninformed search. So we don't know anything about heuristics, we don't need it. It's just about the systematic exploration of the search spaces and how to do that effectively and efficiently. And remember that we have this, these properties of our algorithms. We have breadth first search, which was the most simple thing to do, and I showed how to calculate that with, I think, a first in, first out list. And basically, if you have a finite branching factor, you have a complete algorithm, but it's very bad in terms of time complexity and space complexity. At least it finds you an optimal solution. There have been, one of you, I can't find you now, pointed out rightly that there are two different versions of this in slides and books. Oh, yeah, here you are. So in slides and books. So you will find ones that it says time complexity is b to the power of d, and you will find ones that it's b to the power of d plus 1. And the difference that you will find, so it's in different versions of the same book. It's you find different values here. It doesn't really matter that much. The difference is how you count the distance between the root and the found solution. So in fact, it is twice the same, but the algorithm that you see is also slightly different, because you first you add one additional level first in one of the versions of the algorithms, and you go on one level higher to your fringe in the other version, and both of them are correct, but they are different approaches and different definitions of the D. So I hope that doesn't confuse you too much. The problem in any case remains the same, whether you have the power D plus 1 or the power D, that you are, depending on how deep your solution is, you have an exponential number of nodes that you need to store in your fringe. And that is prohibitively much, it's too much, so this will not work. And the alternative that we discussed was depth first search, and that has the same time complexity because you still need to explore the same tree. But the good thing is that you have a more efficient space complexity, so you don't have to store the entire exponential number of nodes on one level in the fringe. But you can choose a sort of, it looked a little bit like this Christmas tree, that you always need to have once the breadth per level in memory and not the entire breadth on the last exponential level. So, yeah. Because you might have infinite cycles in your state space, and then you have infinite tree length. Yep. So basically, if you look at this, then you could say this is the end of AI, because we can't really systematically calculate through all these solutions. And obviously, there are many approaches to solving this. So by learning, by heuristics, as we've seen in second lecture. But there's also a really beautiful algorithm that solves these problems, and I like it because it's so simple and it's so counterintuitive, and that's the one that I want to discuss now, and that is the depth first iterative search. And so let's start with depth limited search. We've seen already something like this in the case of the adversarial game, where we say, okay, we only look ahead for 3 levels and then we stop. And here it's a bit the same. We say we do depth first search, and then we limit the search to a certain level. And that basically is as if we say at a certain depth L, we stop, and we do as if there are no successes anymore. And that's obviously something that helps us to deal with the incompleteness of the infinite length of the path, because you just stop after length L. The price still is that if you stop before you found the solution, if the depth of the first solution is higher than the length of your search, you will not find a solution, so you're incomplete. But it solves the problem of the time complexity. So you have only to go through all the entire tree up to the length of L. So you're not exponential in terms of the solution anymore, but just on your decision, you know exactly how complex you are. And as we use depth first, again, we only have the linear space requirement, so the advantage of the linear space requirement. So that's very good, but still it doesn't solve our problem because we're still incomplete. We can miss out on some of the solutions. And it really took people 10 to 20 years to come up with a solution that combined those elements of depth first search, of depth limited search, in order to find an algorithm that had all the desired properties of being efficient in space, but still finding all the solutions if necessary. And the idea is so simple that I sort of didn't understand it in the beginning. So the only thing you have to do is to iteratively search for depth limited search and increase the depth of your search. And you do that by just throwing away what you've done before. So this is how it looks like. If we have our tree exploration that where we want to build our search tree, we just start with a depth limited search of depth 1, which is basically we only take the first node, we check whether it's a solution, and if it's not a solution, we've done in our first iteration. So we increase our depth. So now we have a depth limit of 1, and we do depth first search. Yeah? So that's now important that we increase our limit and do depth first search. Here it doesn't matter yet, so we don't see that it's depth first search. But what you do is you check the first node. You have thrown everything away that you have done before, and now we do on the same search space, we construct our search tree up to a length of 1. So this is your level 0, this is level 1. So we start with the leftmost node. If it's not a solution, we go on with our depth first search, and that is then this one. So we have constructed all our complete trees up to the level of length 1. And now the trick comes, once we've done that and we haven't found a solution, we just throw away everything and we start again, but now we do one level deeper. So it's now depth first search with a depth of 2. So we start at the top, we construct the left-hand side, we construct on the left-hand side the successor, but now we have only depth 2, so we don't go really depth first any further, because here we don't find a solution, so we have to do backtracking. We find the neighbor, it's not a solution, so we go up, we find the next one in our depth first search. So we do as if our tree was only 2 levels high, and we search it fully, completely. We haven't found a solution, we just go on and increase now to the level 3. And the trick is that we throw away everything, we don't keep anything in memory, we start from scratch and do depth first again. So now we are here, we go to the left node, we go to the leftmost successor, we go to the nextmost successor, up to the depth limit that we are now, which is 3. we don't look any further. We just stop on this because we don't know. We have haven't found a solution. We do the backtracking, and we do that until we found on this level somewhere. I don't know. Maybe here we found a solution. Yeah. If we hadn't found a solution, we would have increased to depth 4. And again, what would we have done? We would have thrown everything away. So the important thing here is that you do depth first search, which keeps your memory under control. And at each of the levels, you throw it away again. What you have done before, you forget. So you empty your memory and you put the new depth first search in motion. Yeah? Okay, that's obviously the big question, and that's what makes this beautiful. Because in a way, this is very nice to control the space requirement. But the question here is, doesn't that make your time complexity horrible? Yeah. If
so if the solution is not the first 3 levels, for example, why do we start with 4 operation again?
This is a very good question. Why don't we keep the things in memory so that we know we have already searched it? Yeah? Sorry? So I think I know where you want to go, but I don't think it's the answer to the question that we have here. So yeah?
So worst case, the complexity is worse, but on average, it would faster than the
Okay, so here someone says that the time complexity will be worse, but on average it will be better or good enough or comparable. Yeah?
I don't think it will be much worse because we're doing multiple times just the first rows, which have like small number of nodes basically. And for example, the rows with a large number of nodes are going to be done twice. For example, if we find a solution in the last row, we only do it once.
Okay, so this gets far closer to the answer. So I think the answer, the question was why not keep this, all this stuff that we have worked out, why not keep it? The answer is that if we do that, we would do simply breadth first search, or a different way of breadth first search, where we would need to have all the nodes in memory. And that is the memory problem that would give us exponential memory requirement. Yeah? So that would be the space problem, that we don't have enough space to store this stuff. So that's why we throw it away. Yes? Only the last row? Okay, so this is all goes the right direction. It's very, very good. I think this is exactly the problem why you don't do this. And let me show you what happens if I have just a branching factor of 2 and or let me do it with a branching factor of 3, and then we see what happens on each of the levels. So I start with a node, and then I have 3 possible actions I can take. I go to the next level, so in that sense, I have to store, if I only store the last row, I have to store 3 nodes. Yeah? So now on the next level, I have another branching factor of 3. So if I now store this level, I have already an exponential number of nodes to store. Yeah? So this is 9. So this is, what is it, 3 to the power of 2. So the branching factor by the depth. Yeah? So now let me do that one level deeper. So now I have 9 times 3. So which is 3 to the power of 3, so it's 27 nodes. Yeah? But now what you can see is that this number is so much bigger than the number of the nodes that I have above. Yeah? So basically, if I take all the levels above, I get 30 nodes. So the time complexity of investigating those again is small as compared to the number that I have to do only to do it once again. So that is the, sort of an inherent property of the exponential spaces, that the deeper you go, so if we now have 3 times these 27, then the deeper you go, the smaller in comparison your top levels become. Yeah? Because now if I go one level lower, I have 91 nodes, I believe, and above I have only 30. So it's a third now of all the nodes above. And the lower I get, the bigger is this difference. Yeah? So basically, because of the exponential property of this down layer, so only keeping the down layer in memory is already exponential. So I can't even keep this down layer in memory if I go a little bit deeper. So the trick is exactly that we say we don't keep this in memory, and we don't even keep this in memory, we just do it again, because it's so much smaller to do this again as opposed to do this once. And that's why throwing everything above away for a level of search is an efficient way even to do it. So it takes a bit more time, of course, but it's nothing as bad as one would think. Yeah?
My understanding says you say that you prefer time complexity, increasing task complexity rather than space complexity.
Yes, so that's the balance. So you pay the price of a little bit more time complexity in order to restrict your space complexity, but on the one you have a factor of, and I have a number to come here. So we're still in the same O notation class. So we're not even increasing by any exponential factor or linear factor. So if you look at this, the time complexity is still in the same class, in the same O class, and I don't have the numbers here. I should have, but it really is. I think it's by a factor of half of b multiplied or something like this. So it really is not that big in terms of complexity, the time complexity, and it saves you an exponential factor in space. So the gain in space is so much bigger than the loss in time, and that's exactly what makes this algorithm so nice, I think, because it's so simple that I think it's how stupid is it to throw everything away? So I think there are two things to be really to keep in mind, and this is one of the algorithms that you will probably have to perform in the exam. Make sure you know that you do depth first search, because if you would do breadth first search up to a certain level, you would have to take everything in memory and you would lose the memory, the space gain. So you have to do depth first search. But because of this iterative factor, and if you throw everything away, you also gain the space complexity. But you have to do the iteration because otherwise you are not sure that you find all the solutions. So you have to do it iteratively until you find a solution, otherwise you wouldn't be complete. So these are the things that you need to understand. So what do you have to do? Namely, depth first search to level n, throw everything away, and then do depth first to level n+1, and throw everything away, and so forth. That's the one thing you have to learn and do. And you have to understand why you do that in order to save on space, maybe this line you don't want to have in memory. And the time is small as compared to the one that you have to spend on looking through these 27 in the first place. That's all you need to understand here. Yeah?
How does it stop the infinite loops?
you do it iteratively. You go until you find the solution. So even if I have an infinite loop that path here, you would never go it because you go step by step by step.
But then you finish that layer, you don't have a solution, you keep going, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
But wouldn't you just then keep going?
You would only keep going and going and going if your solution is in an infinite position. But the idea obviously here is that we have a finite solution. So this always works with finite solutions, and then after some finite time of x steps, your algorithm will finish. Yeah?
Can you specify the limit?
Sorry?
Can you specify the limit for the thing?
We do that in Minmax, for example. We have explicitly said, okay, we cut off at level 7, but then you're incomplete. This is only complete because you do the iteration until you find a solution. Because you will never know whether the solution is on level 27 or 29. So you have to go on until you find one.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If there's a chance that it's infinite, then we should stop somewhere.
It's an interesting question. So probably the notion of completeness is, it doesn't say that we have a decision procedure. So it could well be that our algorithm is infinite. It will not tell us, like in first order logic where you have a semi-decision procedure, it might not terminate. But that doesn't say anything about the completeness of the algorithm. Yeah? Okay. So this gives us the following more complete picture, and obviously there are more variants and tastes about these uninformed search algorithms. That is basically that we have a depth-limited algorithm. So if I know that my solution is up to a certain depth and I look further, then I also know that I will find the solution. So there is this restriction of the search of depth. So that would be your suggestion. If we know how deep our solutions can be, then you shouldn't look further. So that's, for example, if we have a Schnapsen game, we know that we only have 20 moves. Of course, then we are complete because we can finish after 20 steps. Time complexity for this algorithm is then very, it's the same in principle in the same class. It's of course a bit worse because we have to do this again and again and again. But the space complexity, that's the real gain. We only need to keep a part of the space in memory. Okay. So that was, I think, a very simple algorithm that is not so simple to get to, and that's why I think it's really so nice. There are two things. There's one other thing that I want to mention, and that is the question of how do you represent your state space, and how do you do the search. And there are two ways of searching, basically. And they are called data-driven and goal-driven. And basically you can, I always said now, you start with the initial state, you start with the starting position, but you can also start with the goal state if you want. This is not always possible. Why could it be that you couldn't start with the goal position?
You need to know the goal.
You need to know what the goal is, yes. So suppose I know in chess, I know what the goal is. It's a checkmate position. So why can't I do this anyway then? Yeah? Could be an infinite amount of goals, or at least many of them. So if I know one goal, then I can also do this goal-driven. So I start with the goal, and I try to find my search back to the solution, to the initial state. So if you have this maze, and you are, I think at the star, I think C3, no, you're here, that's me, happy. And now the question is, how do I get to the star? I have the way of doing it data-driven, so I start from the position where I am, and then this is an abbreviation for following this line going to E1. So that's left-hand side. This one is an abbreviation to go to B4 before I have to make a decision. So then I have the decision of going to the left to A4 or going to the right to C4. Where am I? Oh yeah, B4, so I can go up. And so forth, and then I can reach D3 after my search, and I can find a solution to that. And then my depth of this tree would be 4. But of course, I can also do it the other way around, and you see that my tree is, in this case, by coincidence, is smaller. So I start with the position D3, I'm now here, and then what are the options to getting there? And the same. I find the same solution, but now in the other order and with a different search tree. And I would think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty certain that in this scenario where you have the maze and the movements are the same whether you go forward or backward, it doesn't really matter because you don't know upfront what the branching factor of your search is. But of course, there are scenarios where we know that there is difference in branching factor whether we go forward or whether we go backwards. So what you should do in your search scenario is to think of which branching factor is bigger, forward or backward. So one of the questions, for example, is if Matti Huntjes, who some of you might know, is a descendant of Willem van Oranje. And we now want to build a search procedure for data-driven and goal-driven. Can anybody tell me, suppose we have 10 generations between Willem van Oranje and Matti Huntjes, and the question is, what is the more efficient way of searching whether they sort of meet? Yeah, in the middle, yeah?
Well, I think from Matti to Willem, because you only have two parents, and don't only have two parents. Other way around, Willem van Oranje, you may have 20 children. They also all may have 20 children, so that's a very lot longer to do.
Yeah. Could you hear the answer up there? No. So the answer was that you have. We know for certain that someone has only two parents. So if we look for the parents and the grandparents and the ancestors, then we know that the branching factor is 2. And if we go the other way around and look for all the children, then the branching factor might be 20, which I think is a bit too big on average. But so in the example, we go out. We have a 3 children average scenario. So you would have over n generation with 3 children. You would have a search tree of 3 to the power of n. And if you do it goal-driven, so going from Matti Huntjes with his 2 parents, grandparents, and so forth, you would have a search tree of 2 to the power of n. And if you compare these numbers, then you would have to look to 60,000 nodes roughly as compared to 1,000 nodes. So it really is more than an order of magnitude difference whether you search in the one direction or you search in the other direction. So it's always a very important element of designing a search algorithm to think of the direction in which you want to search. And if you know that there is a clear and unique goal, and you know the branching factors, then you be able to use that in order to design your search algorithm. There are actually also combinations of the two, so you start on both ends and you try to sort of match these two. So this is just a rough idea that this is something you should take care of and think about. And so uninformed search has been a very important topic in the beginning of AI, so in the 60s, 70s of the last century. Obviously, it has so big shortcomings with search time, and the idea of just naively looking through these fringe without taking into account some knowledge that we might have about the ordering of the fringe is something that is not very realistic to deal with real-world problems. So that's why the informed search is so important. And here again is an algorithm that is a sort of a classic of the AI literature, and that's the A-star algorithm. And I want to explain you how this A-star algorithm works. So remember, the tree search algorithm in general was that we have this fringe in which we add the node, the root node first, or the starting node first, and then we looked whether the children, whether they were solutions or whether there were no solutions. So if there were children that are no solutions, then you would expand those children and add them to your fringe. If there were no children, then you would return that you didn't find a solution. And then all the question, what it comes down to is you insert your fringe, and you take out elements of your fringe. The question is, which element do you take out of the fringe? And that's why we have these heuristics for, these orderings of this list of nodes that still needs to be explored. And if you have heuristics that tell you, start with this one because this heuristic, this state is the one that is most likely to guide you to the solution. If we have a good heuristics to doing that, then we can find the solution much faster. So that's very important. So remember that we have this the fringe now as a sorted queue. That's the difference, yeah?
Could you just remind, I guess, the class what heuristic means? Exactly.
Okay, so I spoke about heuristics yesterday and on Tuesday. So the heuristic is an estimation which is usually knowledge-driven, so something where we have human knowledge telling us how good a specific state is and how close, how far away we are still from the solution of the problem. And the heuristic is such a function that you assign a value to a node with. And then basically we had the algorithm of best first search, greedy best first, and on Tuesday, I believe, where we have the fringe, and the fringe just contains all the nodes that needs to be explored. And you just order them with your heuristics from what is the distance to the goal. And you always choose the one that is the closest, according to heuristic value, to the goal. And that's the best first. You choose the best according to heuristics, and it's greedy because you always take the best. And then we had one more algorithm, and that was the hill climbing, which is a special case of greedy best first search, where you don't have really a fringe, but you only have one element in the fringe. You always keep the best one, and you throw away all the rest, which is obviously incredibly space efficient, because you only have one element in your fringe all the time. Very, very space efficient, but you might end up in suboptimal solutions. Yeah? So that was a sort of reminder of what we did a couple of days ago. And now there are two extensions to that, which bring us to this algorithm of A star. And the idea of A star is that the problem of this greedy best first approach is that it doesn't take into account of how expensive was it to get to my node in the first place. So it sort of ignores the past of my exploration search. And the idea of greedy best, the A algorithm, so A is the name of the algorithm. The A search is a best first algorithm, but now you define the best node not only as a distance to the solution, but also as the distance of the solution plus the costs that you had in order to get to this node in the exploration in the first place. So now we have our evaluation function is not just h, which was the heuristics to the goal, but it's also the g, which is the cost so far to reach the node. And that's basically all that is to this. So instead of a heuristics like the beeline distance we used in order to say that Arad is 325 kilometers from Bucharest, so let me go to this city because it's the closest to Bucharest. No, what I also have to do is I now have a city, and I will go to the one that is best according to the distance to Bucharest and the way that it takes me to get to the city in the first place. Yeah? Oh, yeah. So that's the important thing. If you ask to build an A algorithm, what you have to do is to calculate the costs to get from the root to this node and to add it to the estimation to how long does it take to get from this to the solution according to my heuristic value. Yep. And then there is this A star algorithm, which is basically exactly the same as the A algorithm. So there's nothing, sort of the algorithm works exactly the same way. So A star is a subclass of the A algorithms where the heuristic function has a specific property. And the specific property is that it has to be admissible in the sense that it never overestimates the cost to reach the goal. So it has always to be very optimistic. So if I have the true cost of getting from a node n to the goal, which is called the H star, so it's the perfect heuristics, then I know that my heuristics has to be smaller or equal to this value. And if it is for each of the goals, then we call the A algorithm that we apply an A star algorithm. So if you get the question of, a typical exam question might be, this is an A algorithm applied on this kind of problem. Is this an A star algorithm? And then the only thing you have to do is to look at the heuristics and tell me whether it's overestimating at some possible times. So think of the question of a B-line distance, the shortest line distance, as it was also called in the slides. So we have, in some cases, you have this grid. You want to move from here to here. And then the B-line distance would be this. And then the question is if we use the B-line distance as our heuristic function, is my algorithm then an A star algorithm or not? What would be the answer? Yeah? It is A star.
Because the B-line distance is the smallest possible distance from the node.
By definition, exactly. So by definition, the shortest line distance is the shortest line between 2 points. So whatever way you take to get from here to here, let's say we do this kind of thing, or we do more on the grid level, whatever movements you can make between 2 points, they can never be shorter than the shortest line that you draw between these 2 points. Yeah? This is exactly the point here. So the shortest line distance never overestimates the actual road distance. You can't get anywhere quicker than using the road distance. Okay. So now here is the example for the applying an A star algorithm to find the shortest path to get from Arad to Bucharest. And I will show you that after the break. So let's meet again at 12, I suggest. See you then.